Друзья,
Здрасте.
Добрый вечер, здравствуйте.
hi friends, hi Joel.
Hello. While we are waiting, I would like to tell a short story related to our discussion about alabaster, rolling deodorant, and all that. So last Sunday, I went. I took part in the liturgy celebrated by Metropolitan Tikhon, head of Orthodox Church of America. So he came here for a visit for 100th anniversary of our cathedral here, and so I was serving with him, and I took all my kids with me. And so at the end of this liturgy, this Metropolitan Tikhon gave them, each of them, some as a present, some holy oil blessed on the relics of Kiev saints in Kiev caves. And so this is exactly what I said. So that's oil. That's some precious oil, and it's the bottle is like with rolling this thing like deodorant, or so you can't. So if you want to take all this oil out, you really have to break it. And so it's.
I guess that proves it. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about our discussion. I thought it was really interesting and like to follow up on it sometime.
Okay. I think you should bring in Russian and American archaeologists and write a joint article. interdisciplinary.
Good idea. Yeah. I think it would be interesting. I know, I have a colleague here who's an archaeologist, but he's not sure he's doing much archaeology anymore. Eric Myers, he's yeah. But yeah.
Okay. I'll share the screen. And we shall proceed according to our usual procedure. Unless someone has one more paper or presentation on some specific topic. If not, let's read. Larissa, would you like to read the Greek text?
Yes, I'll try. Kai Iudas Iskariot lo eiston dodeka apelten pros tous archireis gina auton paradoi autois. Goide accusantes echaresan kai epengelanton auto argurion dunai. Kai etzetei pos auton eukairos paradoi. Kai te prote gemera ton adzuman vote to pascha etion legusin auto homotetai autu puteles apeltontes etoi masomen ginafages to pascha.
Давайте пока здесь остановимся и вначале сосредоточим наше внимание на стихах 10-11. Иуда Искариот, 11-12, пошел к старшим священникам, чтобы выдать им Иисуса. Они выслушали его, обрадовались и обещали дать ему денег. Иуда стал искать удобного случая выдать им Иисуса. Вроде бы с точки зрения перевода и буквального значения текста все понятно. Если бы мы стали писать комментарии, то для нас было бы важно прокомментировать в данном случае Искариот, что оно значит, но с точки зрения нарратива самый главный вопрос, который здесь возникает, это просто, а что значит выдать им Иисуса? The main question that we encounter here, whether we are talking about the search of historical Jesus, whether we are talking about the plot of the gospel as Mark or his sources put it, is what does it mean to betray Jesus? The following narrative, at least it seems, indicates that the main obstacle for the priests and their servants that prevented the priests and their servants from arresting Jesus is that they didn't know how Jesus looks like. And Judas' role was to indicate who in this crowd is Jesus, whom to arrest. But this definitely clashes with the preceding narrative, where Jesus performs deeds and signs and the priests saw him and knew him. How can we reconcile this? If they knew how Jesus looked like, what was the essence of the betrayal?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, it especially clashes with the narrative of the triumphal entry, a few chapters back, where it seems like he made a big stir, and also upset the authorities. So I can't remember what I said about this in my commentary. I think I acknowledged it was a problem, but I'm not sure. There's also, it's also strange, that this is another discrepancy, maybe related. Judas is identified as one of the 12, but you've already been told that in the narrative before. So some people have argued, that this becomes part of the argument that Mark may be relying on a pre-Markan passion narrative, that a source has been included here, which, already identified Judas.
Извините, друзья, только я сейчас не слышу Джоэля? Или
Слышно, но очень тихо.
Я хорошо слышу.
Тихо,
Я
okay.
хорошо слышу.
Can you hear me better now?
wait a second.
Yeah, closer better.
Closer, better. Yeah. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems now it's better.
Lucia?
Лучше?
Yeah, so I said, yes, this is a problem. And I remember that I acknowledged it as a problem in my commentary. I'm not sure how I resolved it. I also wanted to point out there's another discrepancy here in that Judas is identified as one of the 12. Why do we need to be told that? That's already, and as a matter of fact, I think he was especially pointed out when he was introduced in the list of the disciples in chapter 3. So some people have identified that as, one of the marks that there was a previous passion narrative that Mark has taken up into his overall gospel. So yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I guess one theory you could come up with is maybe Jesus wasn't really that famous, and that the gospel writers or their tradition have exaggerated how important he was in narratives like the triumphal entry. I'm going to consult my commentary and see what else I said. I don't know. What do you make of it?
I don't know.
Well, I don't see it as a very serious discrepancy because he was mentioned as one of the 12, but many pages ago, and so a reminder for the reader seems very logical, and also maybe he wants to stress the contrast that he is one of the 12 and yet he is a traitor. So he is a very close disciple and yet he is a traitor. So for me it seems absolutely logical.
Yeah. Yeah, you can think of literary reasons why he might want to emphasize that. And the one that you mentioned, the irony, the contrast between him being one of the 12 and yet he does this horrible deed. But this is often the case that scholars who want to find sources, they will see discrepancies like this as signs of sources coming together, whereas those who don't like the idea of sources, I'm not saying that you are like this, Leonid, but those who are averse to seeing sources will come up with literary explanations, and so sometimes it depends on how great a discrepancy it is. But the larger question of what it was that Judas revealed,
Yes, exactly.
that's I deal with that somewhere in my commentary. I was just looking at it on this passage, and I'm not sure that I do it when I comment on this passage, but when I come to the actual betrayal scene, um, I take it up, but I can't remember what I said.
Okay, we may.
I have a small question regarding the choice of so it's not about maybe, but it's related to understanding, but it's the choice of the verb of Russian verb, like выдать.
Выдать, yeah. Yeah,
Can
what does выдать mean? Yeah.
but there is like so can you comment
Just
on
to give
on the
over,
choice,
right?
on the choice of the verb? So it could be предать, it could be выдать. So what were your reasons behind the choice, behind your choice?
We have seen several times the specific usage of the verb paradidomi in Mark. Here's the list of different occurrences of the verb paradidomi in the Greek Bible. We're not interested by now in the Old Testament, though probably there might have been some cases that may serve as a model for Markan usage of paradidomi, but I think we have looked at these passages at some point of our study, but probably it's a good time also to reintroduce them in the same way as the author of the Gospel reintroduces Judas.
So my question was probably related to the fact that the verb предать in synodal translation probably follows the Slavonic, and the meaning of the verb changed. Yes, in Slavonic it means different thing than in modern Russian. That now предать is really a betrayal, like предательство, and in Slavonic it may mean very different things, like just give. Or...
It's a good question that probably our understanding of the verb предать in Russian and in Church Slavonic differs from the original meaning of the verb.
And maybe it's mainly related to Judas and his betrayal. Maybe that influenced the word, the meaning.
Well, I think maybe we talked about I think in Greek before the New Testament, well, mostly in Greek before the New Testament, paradidomi doesn't have usually a a nuance of betrayal. It just means to give over. And it was, I think, largely through its use in the New Testament that it comes to have this, very negative meaning, which it doesn't necessarily have in Greek. But the other thing that's important is that it's used in Isaiah 53, I think, for the servant who is handed over to death by God. So, that obviously that isn't God doesn't betray him to death, but God delivers him over to the, there we go. Yeah.
Yes. Do you see the text now that Joe speaks about?
Yeah.
Pandas hos probata planetemen, anthropos te hodo autu planete, kakyrus pareduken auton tais amarties hemon. At least in Mark, this verb seems to be probably the main topic of the gospel. It's the history of how first John the Baptist and then Jesus were handed over.
Yeah, and there's also a reference in chapter 13 to the disciples will be handed over. He prophesies that they will be. So Norman Perrin said, first John the Baptist preaches and is handed over. Then Jesus preaches and is handed over. And then the disciples will preach and be handed over. And that's probably a deliberate homology.
Yes, and in my answer to Father Leonid, my answer is that despite the Russian tradition of using the verb предать here, Иудина предательство, I think it would be better for us to try to make this verb so important for Mark, where it unifies different passages and different topics together to make a consonant translation. In this case, выдать may be better employed in different contexts.
Yes, I agree completely that no, предать it really yes, it's maybe выдать preserves like the original meaning better than предать. Yes, I agree with that. And probably you discussed it many times before, but I wasn't present. So can you also comment on the translation of Архиереус, старший священник? Why do you choose this translation?
Старший священник вместо первого священника.
Okay, Mikhail, can you go back to your translation?
Yes, wait a second. In the Gospels, we have several archiereis. While generally speaking, according to what we know about the hierarchy of priests in the Second Temple Judaism, there was just one big priest, Kohen Gadol. So I decided to use this expression "старшие священники," senior priests, in order to stress that some group is being meant here. But I think we discussed this at some point, and I agree that probably the more literal translation первосвященники would better render this paradox that we have already in Mark, that
Yes, because
which should normally be used to refer to one person is referred to an unidentified group. There was some hypothesis that probably the plural archeres here refers to a person who is an archereus now, and to those who kept this office earlier but were fired from this office. But it seems that for Mark, the hoi archeres is really a group larger than just presidents and ex-presidents. It's just the ruling part of the temple priests.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
that's
but
right. I also think it's kind of anomalous. I think in other Jewish sources you don't find this sort of plural. But I think it's certainly right that there was only one high priest, though there was also some volatility amongst the high priests. And, I think, I don't know, Caiaphas was deposed or his predecessor was deposed, but he was still around apparently. So.
But in any case, if we speak about the current high priest and ex-high priest, then we speak about maybe 2 persons, 3 persons.
yes, and here
It seems that Mark has a whole strata in mind.
no, but I think that historically it's at this precise moment it's more than 2 or 3 people, because it's like all the sons-in-law of Anna were high priests, I think, or so it's
I mean,
a
Mark
larger
does
group.
also, he also refers to the Sanhedrin, which, which did not have at this time the sort of, fixed, a fixed membership. It was just the high priest and other members of the elite, many of whom were from priestly or high priestly families, who actually ran the place.
But
So,
anyway, I would prefer, yes, to have, because if you translate just like старшие священники, of course you can make a footnote, but well, it hides the problem from the reader. So
Yes,
I would prefer translation первосвященники. Imagine that there would be some document from our time referring that the popes decided to do that and that. Well, I would like to preserve this very strange
Yes, exactly.
idea that the popes could meet and do something. That normally you would have just one pope. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an interesting, question. To what extent should translations preserve the problems?
mhm.
And to what extent should they try to, be not so awkward? So I guess I agree with you that I often prefer, I want people to be able to see the problems, but then sometimes it becomes so problematic
Mhm.
that it's difficult to read.
No, I think in this case, первосвященники in plural would be just a good device to show the reader the paradox that is inherent in the Greek text.
But
Yeah.
I agree that maybe Mark doesn't see it as a paradox. Maybe I agree with John. Maybe he refers to, I don't know, really like to the whole families. Like we will call, the royal family, and it doesn't really matter who has which position in this family. For ordinary people, they all are like royal family, like royalties, and maybe it's not that important that there is just one monarch and the others are
I think
relatives.
the best explanation would be that Mark probably was not so much interested in the structure of the Jewish leadership of that time.
But he
Obviously,
does want to he does want to emphasize that this arresting party is from the Jewish leadership, but the Gospels are not totally clear about this, because I think especially in John, you get the impression that it might have been, not a Jewish group. So, and this also might come into the discussion of, why Judas had to identify him. If the arresting party was Roman rather than Jewish, then they might not know so well who this Jesus was. So I think that also comes into these discussions. But Mark definitely, and mostly the Gospels want to, blame the Jews for this arrest.
yes, it's a good point. If we agree with the more radical critics that think that the early Christian tradition wanted to move the blame for Jesus' death from Romans to the Jewish leadership, then this strange motive that Judas had to indicate that this person is Jesus. This may be a remnant of some authentic memories about what happened with the historical Jesus before that movement of the blame from Romans to the Jewish authorities took place in the early church.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how radical I am, but I do think that, you see a movement. The later the gospel, the more guilty the Jews get, and usually the less guilty the Romans are. So, then, rewinding the tape, extrapolating back, one does wonder, what was the historical reality? To what extent, uh, was the Jewish leadership involved? I think they probably were involved, but it's certainly true that there is a tendency, as I say, in the development of the Gospels to make the Jewish leadership and the Jews as a whole more guilty, and the Roman leadership less guilty. And then you can see that even further in the development of the tradition later on, like in the Gospel of Peter. you know, it's the Jews who actually crucified Jesus physically. So the continuation, there is a trajectory here, and which does, you know, raise the historical question, which also I think has hermeneutical implications.
Yes.
Uh,
A Russian manuscript with the so-called all believers background, where we have pictures of the crucifixion and the soldiers crucifying Jesus are explicitly inscribed as Jewish soldiers.
Ah,
Żydowski woj.
May I make a very short remark that maybe we could understand it as the fact that they don't know how he looks like, but we may understand it in a very different way, that they want to arrest him when there are not that many people around, so they are looking for to how to make it F Kairos. And the good moment for that would be the Paschal night, when people would go and visit each other, more or less like in, you know, New Year's night in Soviet Union. And there would be different groups of people going to visit their relatives or friends, and that would be a good moment, but that would happen in the dark, and so they would need someone to identify him, just because he would know where he is. And I remember that Anna Ilyinishna discussed the meeting with Nicodemus in the Gospel of John, and she explained it that that happened also during a Paschal night, because that was the best moment for someone to see each other, because everyone would visit everyone, and that wouldn't be suspicious if he wanted to visit to see Jesus secretly. That would be the best moment to do that.
it's like the Russian New Year, but not so much drinking. Is that, or maybe there, maybe there was
No,
actually a lot.
no. The idea is that the idea, like the Soviet analog of Seder, like New Year Seder, would be that you would meet the New Year with your parents or grandparents, and then you would go and visit your friends and etc. after midnight, and that would happen more or less the whole night.
Yeah,
Young
we used to
people.
do that in
For
Scotland.
many centuries, the gospel stories provoked fantasy of people of different background. Still, I think we should be more how would you call it, Joel, in good
Sober.
English?
More sober.
Wissenschaftlich, yeah.
More shy.
But yeah, well, I mean, but I think that about Nicodemus, I'm not so sure, but I think that it's very possible explanation that they want to arrest him without too much crowd, without drawing too much attention to that. And
I mean, yeah,
therefore,
it's also true. It's also true that he's, I mean, he's doing some things in public, but then where, he's staying with his disciples, may be a secret. And I think there's other indications within the narrative that, you know, he doesn't want to do things openly. He wants to do them in a clandestine manner, like the procuring, um, things like the procuring of the colt, and also when he goes, well, we're going to have this soon, he tells the disciples they're going to follow somebody, and the person will go into a house, and that's where you prepare the Seder. It could very well be, this is sort of like spycraft.
Mhm.
You'll meet somebody, it's all been prearranged, and you'll meet somebody and you follow him, and that's where you go. So, I think that may be historical, that where he was, where he was hanging out with his disciples was not generally known, and that could be also what Judas is betraying.
Okay. With this, we are going to the next pericope. Larissa, can we ask you to read verses 12 through 15?
Caite prote gemera ton adjumon, goteto pascha, etion, legusin auto, voimatetai auto, utelis, apeltontes, etoimasomen, gina fages to pascha. Kai aposteli do ton mateton auto, kai legi autois, hypagete eisten polin, kai apantesei jumin anthropos keramion judatos bastadzon. Aklutesate auto kai hupu ean iselte eipate toi poikates pote potiko didaskalius legiai. Pu estinto kataliumamu hupu to pascha metaton mateton mu fago.
Окей. Первый день праздника пресных хлебов, протогомератон азюмон, когда закалывают пасхального ягненка, вот это Пасха Этион, ученики спросили Иисуса, куда велишь нам пойти, чтобы приготовили тебе пасхальную трапезу. Look in this translation now, I think that I would probably like to rewrite it. Because we know that in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, Pesach, Pascha, refers in some contexts to the feast, but mostly to the Paschal lamb itself. In the same way, the Aramaic Pascha, and the Greek Pascha that we see here. So I think that our translation of то Пасху is пасхальный ягненок, когда закалывают пасхального ягненка. Вот это Пасха Этион is correct. But then probably in the direct speech of the disciples, hina fages to Pascha, we should also keep this meaning. пасхальный ягненок. Because the Pascha can refer either to the time of the feast or to the Paschal lamb, but not to the Paschal meal in general. Probably when I translated пасхальную трапезу and not пасхального ягненка here, I had in mind that, in fact, the story that we read afterwards paradoxically has no reference to the Paschal lamb. That's why I don't remember whether it was consciously or unconsciously I took the Paschal lamb out of the disciples' speech. But I think that whether I did it consciously or unconsciously, I wasn't right at that moment.
But you mentioned Paschal lamb in the verse 16, right?
Yes, that let's be closer to the Greek text and to the really behind this. Он отправил 2 учеников и сказал им: ступайте в город. Вам встретится человек, несущий кувшин воды. Следуйте за ним. И там «Хопуан эсселте», я перевел как «пока он не войдет в дом». Ну, я думаю, что это вполне допустимый парафраз. Может, понятно, что речь идет не о том, что он входит, там, не знаю, в тюрьму или во дворец первосвященника. Видимо, он входит в дом, это видно по контексту, да? «Хопуан эсселте», пока он не войдет в дом. И скажите хозяину: учитель спрашивает, где комната, в которой я с учениками мог бы праздновать Пасху. Наверное, опять же, «гопуто Пасха фаго», перевести, я с учениками. С пасхальным ягненком можно было бы здесь сделать. Я с учениками. Как то русский сказать, съел бы пасхального ягненка, ел бы пасхального ягненка.
Мог бы есть.
Ну, просто ели бы, да?
Мгм.
Он покажет вам большую комнату на верхнем этаже, приготовленную и прибранную, по-гречески у нас «эстроменон хетоймон». Вероятно, имеется в виду, что она была приготовлена в смысле того, что застелена, да? Ну, приготовленную, прибранную, убранную. Там и приготовьте все, что нужно. Это очень загадочный текст.
Mhm.
The text, of course, is quite enigmatic. And some people suggest that probably there's a kind of clandestine activities here, kind of some agreement arranged between Jesus and the owner of this house, and a special sign that was to be given. This is an interesting hypothesis, but
I mean,
to
it's
my
not the
mind,
way that Mark presents it, but you know, but it does remind me of spy novels, you know,
of what?
Mhm.
Of spy
of
Spy
novel?
spy
novels.
novels or accounts of
Mhm.
actual spies.
Mhm.
Um, um,
Yes. This is one way of reading this.
yeah.
Another way would be to compare this text with the text that we have read not so long ago, maybe about half a year ago. Let's
At the beginning of
open it.
chapter 11, right? Yeah.
Yes, you got my idea.
Mm. Well, and I think in both of those cases, what Mark wants to emphasize is that Jesus has supernatural knowledge, clairvoyance, or, you know, he knows, he can see from far away and he knows things that nobody else knows.
Yes, but вот центр очень близка, когда они подходят к Иерусалиму. Иисус посылает вперед двух учеников,
Mhm.
имейте опять тех, что двух учеников, и говорит, мы идите в селение, что прямо перед вами. Как войдете, тотчас увидите на привязи осленка, которым никто из людей еще не ездил. Отвяжите его, приведите сюда. Если вас спросят, что вы делаете, отвечайте, господину понадобилось. Он тотчас вернет его. Ученики отправились в селение, и у ворот переулки нашли осленка на привязи. Они отвязывают его, приводят осленка к Иисусу, покрывают своим плащом, как попоной, и Иисус садится верхом. There are a lot of parallel things in these
Mhm.
two stories. Jesus is a clairvoyant who sees and knows what should be. Two disciples sent by Jesus to prepare something. He's entered into Jerusalem in chapter 11 and the Paschal Seder in chapter 14.
And it turns out exactly as Jesus said it will.
Yes,
I
and
think very similar language.
in both cases, the things turn out exactly as Jesus had predicted. But here in chapter 11, there's not a hint at the spy novel.
No, true. But you know, I do think that, I mean, it's a significant parallel, and it's important for Mark to emphasize that, you know, both the triumphal entry and then even more so, you know, the beginning of the Passion narrative itself isn't something that caught Jesus by surprise. You know, that the Passion itself is something that, you know, as he's prophesied 3 times in the gospel. And I think that's important in the tradition to emphasize, because it was a big question for the Christians. You know, why if Jesus was the Messiah predicted in the scriptures, how come he died on a Roman cross? That, that I think that was a problem for the earliest Christians, and that's why you have an early development of the Passion narrative, probably even before the Gospels, because they had to answer this question of, how can your Messiah end up dead on a Roman cross?
Yes, I think the key verse here from verse 16, that the disciples Aaron katos apen autois. The disciples found everything exactly as he had predicted. But then we have a choice. Either this was katos apen autois because this was something prearranged as an spy novel of the human level, on the earthly level, or this was katos apen autois because as a son of God, he saw everything beforehand, even before any necessity to get in touch with some spy characters and arrange special signs and so on and so on. I think that even though for a modern reader who has read a lot of spy novels, the spy novel interpretation, the spy novel exegesis may seem natural, but I think this is completely alien to what Mark himself wanted to say.
May I?
Well,
I also have several questions regarding
Okay.
this. What you said. So, the I would so I would in our I would divide this. So there are this passage is really very strange, and I would divide. So it there are several questions that come to mind. So one of them is why Jesus says all that. So is it a prediction or is it prearranged, etc. But there is another question. What is about the owner of this house? Why does he do all that? Why does he agree, etc., etc.? So who is he? And so I would like to ask you what do you think? So first of all, this sign, this man carrying a jar of water, is it a normal sight or is it something unusual? Is it is it normally a women's job to carry water? And is it therefore a sign of that it's not a family who lives there, but maybe some religious group, etc.? Because I know that there are such commentaries. I don't know, what do you think of them? So is it because I know that
yeah,
sometimes there are some speculations that maybe it's some Essene group because they have a lot of uh, rituals with water, cleansing rituals, etc. Therefore, they need a lot of water, and this man would always go with this, bringing these jars of water, etc. Another
yeah.
question is about he says that says that the teacher asks etc. So for the owner of the house, does he understand who is this teacher? Is it for him the teacher, like this precise Jesus himself, or is it just a normal, again, a normal idea that the disciples would go around and look for a place for their, like a teacher, like any teacher? Maybe there would be hundreds of such teachers in Jerusalem these days, and they would all look for lodging where they would eat Pascha, and that would be one of many.
Well, I mean, I do think that I guess this is one of these cases where I would feel fairly confident that in saying that on a historical level, we probably do have to do with prearrangement, like in my spy novels. Um, I more difficult in the case of chapter 11, but so it's one of, I think, many cases where maybe the historical reality was different from what the gospel writers want to present. I can still, believe that in a sense it's true what the gospel writers are presenting, that, all of this is the outworking of God's will, but I think there is a discrepancy. About the man carrying the jug, I have a note in my commentary, and I acknowledge that people often say that this is generally a woman's job. Women carry things on their heads. Um, and this I this suggestion goes back to Père Lagrange, who lived in Jerusalem around the turn of the 20th century, and he noticed that it was always women who were carrying the things on their heads. But if you look even in the Old Testament, more often it's women who are carrying things on their heads, but also men carry things on their heads. So uh, it is, it's not impossible, and it probably wouldn't have been even unusual to see a man carrying something on his head. So, I mean, it's an attractive way of solving the problem, but I don't think it really solves it.
Yeah, I would like also to know make some small comment. I don't know. I like this passage very much because it has this sequence of direct speech within direct speech within direct speech. I think it's the longest sequence that I saw. Uh, so Jesus said to them, uh, "Say to the owner of the house."
Mhm.
The teacher asks, so it's again direct speech within direct speech, and then what he actually asks, so where is this room, etc. So it's,
Yeah,
if you
that's a
would
nice
put like,
literary,
so if you
that's a
would put
nice literary observation. Yeah.
if we would put parentheses, you would need 4 different types of parentheses within each other. So
Yeah, which would get messy. Yeah, but that's
Mm.
no, that's a nice observation. One thing it reminds me of is I think Mark does like indirect speech, uh, and when you look at maybe especially what Matthew does with it, he often changes the indirect speech into direct speech. Um, Now, one other minor discrepancy I'd like to point out here, and I think we've talked about this, but this is taking place on, according to the story, verse 12, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Mhm.
Uh, but, by the usual Jewish reckoning, the feast doesn't begin until the evening, right?
Mhm.
So people say that this is more of a, a non-Jewish or Roman way of reckoning the day. For the Romans, the day begins at 6 in the morning. Whereas, usually in Jewish sources, especially of this time, the day begins in the evening. And, you have it in the Bible, and it was evening and it was morning the first day. Evening comes first. Um, However, I think I say in my commentary, you actually have evidence of both systems of reckoning in the Bible already, and maybe also in Josephus. So I'm not sure that we should see too much in that discrepancy. I had a question about the translation in verse 14. Poka on nie voidiet vedom. Is the nie negative there?
No,
No, it's the difference between English and Russian negation, right?
So the nie corresponds to ean or something? It's
So until
Yes.
he, so in English it will be until he enters the house without, so.
okay. Okay. So it's not negative.
No.
But
yes, and
okay.
yeah, in some languages, such temporal constructions are used with the negative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You should do this until something happens. This means that you should not do this
Mhm.
Okay.
during the period when something does not happen.
Okay, but my other question is the pakad, isn't that a temporal word? Whereas hopu is location.
Yes. Yes, it's a good question. And I also wanted to
Mhm.
concentrate on the hopu because it's not only local, but it's local indefinite.
Yeah. Okay. Wherever he, well, especially
Yes,
with the ean, wherever he goes in.
yes. It's not where
Mhm.
Yeah.
he enters, but wherever he enters.
Yeah.
I think this also militates against the spy novel interpretation
Uh-huh.
of these
Mhm.
verses.
Mhm.
Because in spy verse interpretation, it's not, you do not say to a spy that you must follow this or that person wherever he goes, because you know where he goes.
Well,
I think that this indefiniteness.
No. I disagree. That's exactly like in spy novels because that is the person, but he doesn't know where exactly would he go. So no. That's the whole idea of spy novel. They would go wherever he would go because he has this sign.
but why, but so why did you turn paka into, I mean, hopu into paka? I mean, why did you turn like a
It was
local, even
it was
an indefinite local into a
it
temporal?
was probably on stylistic grounds, but I wouldn't.
Куда бы он ни пошел, куда бы он ни зашел, ну это странно. Куда бы он ни пошел.
Куда бы он ни зашел. Куда бы он ни
I
зашел.
mean, yeah, I mean, not that it's that important, but I was just curious about. And the kudabui would be, that would kind of correspond to the eon, right? It makes it more indefinite.
Так лучше стало или хуже носители русского языка?
А можно еще раз, как было?
Сейчас.
Но мне кажется, так можно по-русски. Меня немножко смущает конец фразы. Вот мы его сегодня поправили, но мне кажется, что вот так по-русски немножко не очень. В которой я и ученики ели бы пасхального ягненка. Вот это, мне кажется,
Сейчас
все-таки...
давайте решать проблемы по мере поступления.
Да. Но вот это, мне кажется, можно, так как вы сейчас написали. Нет, ну так.
Нет, я просто выделил два варианта.
Это два, это два разных варианта. Окей. Следуйте за ним.
Выделяю двумя разными цветами, просто два разных. Нет, не так.
Мне нравится вот то, что желтым. Мне нравится это. Следуйте за ним, и куда он войдет.
Well, don't change it because of me. I'm not a Russian speaker. So.
Нет, но это хороший.
Да? Сейчас.
I hope when this is published, you'll leave all those colors because I really like your colors. I especially like this blue.
But if you like it, I would keep it.
I hope so. But just change the paka, right?
Yes. Что-то немножко уже сам запутался.
Мне кажется, что пока, ну, мне кажется, что это немножко хуже. Почему? Потому что пока оно хорошо смотрится, если оно идет, следуйте за ним, пока он не войдет в дом. Но тут тогда мешает это самое, как бы, начинается вроде новый стих, поэтому, но с другой стороны, все эти границы кто устанавливает?
Нет, мне пока не нравится, действительно.
Нет, я говорю, мне пока, ну, кажется, можно было бы, если его целиком с предыдущим, а с последующим уже не очень.
Да, вот так у нас двумя разными цветами выделены два разных варианта. Кто за синий, кто за желтый. Давайте проведем микроголосование. Кто следует за ним, пока он не войдет в дом, и скажите хозяин дома. Трам-пам-пам. Кто за синий вариант пока? Поднимите руку. Виртуальная. Я вижу Славу.
Ну, тут еще можно было бы и когда он... Следуйте за ним, и когда он войдет, там скажите хозяину дома.
Окей.
Тоже
Двоих. А кто за желтый вариант? Следуйте за ним, и куда он войдет, там скажите хозяину дома. Кто за желтый вариант?
Ну,
Лариса. Отец Леонид.
я бы глобально за желтый,
Чего?
глобально я за желтый, но мне кажется, что его надо чуть-чуть тоже все равно перефразировать, потому что... Почему? Потому что при беглом чтении получится, что это прочитается «следуйте за ним, куда он войдет». А вот это вот все-таки это странно немножко «следуйте за ним и куда он войдет». Если так бегло читать, то это будет непонятно. И что-то такое...
Следуйте за ним, куда он войдет?
Но это будет вот так прочитано, и мне кажется, это не очень хорошо. Следуйте за ним, куда он войдет.
Нет, ну почему? Здесь есть «и». Следуйте за ним. и куда он войдет, там скажите. Это вполне. Нет, вот на мой взгляд, они так вот равноценные варианты. Вполне.
Ну, второй вариант мне больше нравится, потому что он подчеркивает действительно, что, может быть, мы не знаем, куда он идет.
Почему бы нам
Ну
не
да,
ставить слово «там» перед «куда»? Следуйте за ним, и там, куда он войдет, скажите хозяину.
давайте. Дай.
Мгм. Да, так лучше.
Да? Так лучше?
Мгм. Да, так лучше.
Мгм.
Хорошо. Теперь с Машиной правкой у нас какое будет голосование? Кто за
Там, куда он
желтый вариант с Машиной правкой? Лариса и отец Леонид раньше были за желтый вариант. Джой к нам присоединяется как носитель русского языка. Маша, а вы за свой вариант или против?
Вы знаете, вот как ни странно, мне больше нравится, куда он войдет, там скажите. Хотя я не могу это обосновать. Именно потому что там, куда он войдет. Вот это там, куда нормально? То есть перенести указательное перед придаточным это хорошо, но вот именно сочетание с там, куда. Обычно там, где, но может быть я...
Владимир Туровский, ты с нами? Эксперт по русскому языку. Нет, некоторые эксперты отсутствуют.
Не, присутствует. Я просто как-то не могу сообразить, как лучше.
Вот.
Ну ладно, хорошо. Давайте тогда пока оставим. Проблема действительно здесь поднята. Спасибо, друзья. Вот.
Мне кажется, что там все-таки какое-то синтаксически немножко излишнее. Но нету лучшего ответа.
Хорошо. А может быть, тогда вот так.
А если покуда он не войдет в дом?
У нас, как было подчеркнуто, проблема возникает в том, что у нас вот здесь как бы запятая, это запятая у
Да,
нас.
да.
Вот если мы здесь поставим точку,
Но тогда станет только желтый вариант.
да,
Ну, с точкой понятнее получается, действительно.
То есть, а Кай убираем.
ну-ка и у нас оно,
Да понятно, что там. Но, конечно, после точки там, куда смотрится лучше, чем после запятой.
ну да, может быть, даже после точки даже можно сохранить вот такой порядок слов, потому что уже,
Ну, это вообще замечательно.
Ну, это все-таки вот такая конструкция, мне кажется, я, конечно, тут не уверен, но мне кажется, что она очень сильно выдает, сразу понятно, что это текст переводной. И сразу понятно, что это текст... Вот при переводе такие штуки появляются, а вот в тексте на русском языке так может быть?
В устной речь, мне кажется, запросто. Куда ты войдешь, там давай наводи порядок. Нет?
Мне кажется, все-таки эта фраза какая-то строго переводная.
Но она очень далека от оригинала при этом.
Почему?
Ну, потому что
Опа,
все-таки
она целта.
там, куда это все-таки тут прямо...
Как? Она, по-моему, почти дословно. Гопан
Нет,
селта.
я совершенно не настаиваю на том, чтобы куда он войдет, скажите хозяину. Вот мне кажется, что дословно было бы, если бы там убрать вообще. Но я не за то, чтобы его убирать.
Вот это, мне кажется, точно смотрело бы не просто как переводное, а как
А
перевод.
как подстрочник нехороший.
Мгм.
Окей,
Не,
ну,
вот вроде
подумаю.
хорошо.
Можно еще спросить про пасхального ягненка?
Да.
Я прошу прощения, я по-русски. Вот, может быть, не 3 раза в этих стихах, употреблять, выражение "пасхальный ягненок", а все таки 1 или 2 даже раза сохранить Пасха, для пасхального ягненка, потому что есть важная параллель с апостолом Павлом, 1 Коринфянам 5:7, там, где сказано: "Христос Пасха наш". И вот
Да.
эту параллель было бы важно сохранить, тем более Марк и Павел, они связаны. Вот. А у Павла
Да.
переводить "пасхальный ягненок" невозможно, потому что там это, так сказать, звучит, богословски значимо, а все таки термин "ягненок" — это Иоаннов термин, а не Павлов. Вот. Поэтому, может быть, 1 раз написать "пасхального ягненка", а все таки в остальных случаях...
Но Павел-то явно, он вообще фарисей из фарисеев по своему бэкграунду, он явно имеет в виду именно ягненка перед глазами. Ибо
Да,
Христос,
Да.
пасхальный ягненок наш, заколот за нас.
Да, он
конечно,
просто не, он просто слово ягненок не говорит, но, конечно, он имеет в виду того же ягненка, да.
конечно, он
Нет,
имеет в
другое
виду...
дело, я согласен с Ларисой Юрьевной, что может быть просто 4 раза подряд писать слово ягненок, если в тексте нет ни разу слова ягненок. Это, с одной стороны, это последовательно, а с другой стороны, все-таки это может, например, если это будет читать какой-то огромный любитель просто вот ягнят, например, не специально пасхальных, он может отсюда сделать вывод, что...
Павел, конечно, имеет в виду ягненка, но кроме смысла есть еще вокабуляр, который тоже имеет значение.
То есть вы то, что в каком-нибудь одном из мест ради русской стилистики поставить Пасху вместо пасхального
Да,
ягненка.
да. Тем более, что понятно, что тут идет о ягненке речь.
Ну хорошо, давайте поставим пасхальную трапезу.
Мгм. Но именно Пасху, мне кажется. Приготовить для тебя Пасху, а не трапезу.
Если вы ради Павла, то я совершенно назначен то, чтобы у Павла переводить там Пасха как пасхальный ягненок. Ну как?
Мгм.
Христос, Пасха наша, заколот за нас, заколота за нас.
Да, это иначе не... Да, я абсолютно
Совершенно,
согласен.
совершенно, мне кажется, носитель русского языка не поймет, почему нужно творожный кексик закалывать. Вот. Конечно, это именно пасхальный ягненок у него там.
Да, но там только не заколот, а заклан, может быть. Вот
Мгм.
лучше.
Ну, заклан, хорошо.
Мгм.
Вообще, конечно, заколот и заклан — это просто две
Стилистически.
параллельные формы в славянских языках, но они действительно стилистически разошлись. Вот. Когда мы дойдем до перевода и комментирования Павловых посланий, то можем задуматься насчет того, выбирать нам там заколот или заклан. Но в любом случае я предварительным образом за то, чтобы там, конечно же, ягненок был.
М,
Ну как? Ну, давайте откроем. Говорит, напомните, какое это место?
1 Коринфянам 5:7. Ну просто амнос – это Иоаннов термин. Павел нигде его не использует, и Марк вроде тоже.
Ну а что же делать? Но они же, хотя и не употребляют, но они имеют в виду. Вот видите, даже Валентина Николаевна пишет эксплицитно пасхальный ягненок.
Нет, ну действительно, просто Пасха без всяких объяснений в русском языке, если это мы хотим на русский язык переводить, в русском языке все-таки это может быть праздник, это может быть действительно блюдо пасхальное, но это все-таки не...
Михаил Георгиевич, во-первых, не видно Bible Works, а во-вторых, может быть, для нашего уважаемого Джоэля тоже сказать, о чем мы говорим. Я просто...
Joel, I think you are already proficient in Russian enough to understand what you're talking about. We are speaking about whether we can translate to Pascha in Russian just with one word, Pascha, or пасхальный ягненок, Paschal lamb.
Да, вот пасхальная жертва, абсолютно. Я тоже самое хотел сказать, что если хочется не использовать слово ягненок или агнец, то можно сказать пасхальная жертва. Да, я тоже самое хотел предложить.
Now, presumably they were eating more than just lamb. And seems to me that what it means in Mark is prepare the Passover meal, not just the lamb. Probably. But certainly, yeah, the Pauline passage might point in the direction of the Passover lamb.
Yes, I think the link between Pauline thought and Mark that Larissa indicated speaks in favor of Christ in 1 Corinthians is a Paschal lamb.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I wonder if, Mark's readers would have been distinguishing, maybe the word would have had a certain ambiguity, which they might not even notice, that it refers both to the meal and to the lamb itself.
yes, this brings us to the question, that's probably most important question for this pericope, namely, where did this Paschal lamb, which is mentioned at least thrice in the beginning of the chapter, disappear? Because we hear about bread, about wine, but not about the Paschal lamb.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say that, if you want to see, some historicity to this, maybe Jesus wanted to interpret the bread and the wine and not the lamb. So it doesn't mean that there wasn't a lamb present. But it's not what he wanted to emphasize.
But in the context of the very symbolic nature of this narrative, the lamb is definitely in the center of the Paschal symbolism. So the disappearance of the lamb is quite significant. And
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to agree with the term disappearance, but I don't know. Maybe we should talk about it.
absence.
Maybe you should give me a week to think about it, and we should talk about it next week.
Okay. In any case, we are almost at the end of our time, and exactly by the end of our time, we came to the most important question of all. And I suggest that next time we start with this question. I have some tentative answers to this. I'm not sure whether you, Joel, would agree with this or not. You also have explanations for this in your commentary. So I hope our next meeting may be one of the most interesting in the whole series of our meetings.
Okay, I'll have to go see what I said in my commentary, because I
Okay.
forget. But I also want to hear your explanation. So,
Okay.
I,
So we meet in a week's time to discuss this most important question, which I think is important not only for our exegesis of this pericope, but also for our understanding of the whole Gospel of Mark and both its time, date, environment.
okay, I'll look forward to that.
Okay.
So you will be coming here an hour later next week, right? On the
Yes.
first day of the
Yes.
because
It's
my
good.
time is changing. Yeah.
Yes. It's good that you reminded us. So next time we meet. Next time we meet at 8:30. Is it okay with everyone?
8:30.
8:30?
8:30.
Okay.
8:30. Okay.
At 8. Is it okay with you if we meet at 8?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Me. Yeah. That's fine for me. Yeah.
8 is okay with you. You will be ready by 8.
So
8 most.
Yeah.
for
Okay.
Joel and for me, so changes nothing. Yes, so we for us it's still the same time as.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, it's nothing. Yeah. But
Mhm.
as Masha told me the last time, the 7, she said, Joel, in Russia, nothing changes. So your time doesn't change, but my time does.
No, but you no, but you will meet at 8 for
Yeah.
our sake.
Yeah.
So
But
that's
it'll be the same time for me. Yeah. But but different for you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in that sense, in Russia, everything changes, but for me, nothing changes.
But the times are the same.
Yeah.
Yes. For you, the time
The
is
time is, yeah. I will come at 12 o'clock, but it will be 8 o'clock there rather than 7 o'clock. So,
Mhm.
okay. So we meet at 12 o'clock Eastern time. Yes.
Mhm.
correct. Yeah.
And 8 o'clock Moscow time.
Good.
Okay.
Хорошо.
See you.
До скорого.
До
Bye.
скорого. Bye.
Thank you.
Спасибо.
До свидания.
Привет из Петербурга. Я тут на конференции. До свидания.
Привет Петербургу.
Да. До свидания.
До свидания.
Спасибо, до свидания.